Trelawney was a rich old man, ancient and gnarled just like the house he lived in. A lonely large house, sat upon a top of a cliff, overlooking the Cornish seas, which tossed and roared and churned below upon the rocks. 2 miles he lived away from his nearest neighbour, and the people in the town below said he was a most peculiar old man. Taciturn and awkward and cantankerous, not outright nasty, but just difficult and awkward and peculiar. And only the oldest people in the town could remember when Trelawney was young. For whilst Trelawney was old and rich now, once he had been young and poor. When he was but 8 years old, his mother put him out as an apprentice to a chandler, a candle maker in the town. For she had 7 other children to take care of and simply not the time to invest in or think about young Trelawney. But Trelawney did not complain, for he enjoyed being in the candle making shop far more than he ever enjoyed being at home. For there he discovered the great love of his life. Candles were a thing he adored from the moment he clapped eyes upon them in the shop. He loved the waxy feel of them, he loved the aroma of them, he loved hearing the boiling wax bubbling away as it was being prepared to make new candles. He loved the array of colours that the master candle maker produced. He loved the long tall candles and the short fat candles, the ornate candles and the plain candles. He loved the different scents and aromas that the chandler sometimes mixed into his candles. But more than anything else, what he loved was the light, the flicker of candlelight, dancing and shaping and twisting and turning, bringing that wonderful glow to a dark room. For the one thing that Trelawney disliked with as much passion as he loved candles was darkness. It reminded him too much of the hovel he had grown up in. And so little by little he learnt the trade, for his master was a kindly old man, a man without wife, without children of his own, and he took young Trelawney to his heart as if he were his own son. And Trelawney became as good a candle maker as the old man ever had been. When finally the old candle maker shuffled off his mortal coil, he deposed of his shop in his last will and testament to his assistant, to his apprentice, who is now fully skilled enough to call himself a master chandler. And so Trelawney was in his element, making candles and selling candles around town, putting them out, distributing them around the place. And the thing he loved most, and strange it may be, you think, for a man who so disliked darkness, but come the winter, when darkness fell early, he would light a candle and place it in the window. He would want the passers-by to see the candlelight flickering and dancing and turning in the shop window, so that they might lure into the shop, wanting candles of their own. But more than just wanting to lure in customers, he loved the glow and the warmth and the aroma, the gentleness, that wonderful, transformative, magical atmosphere that the candlelight brought into the otherwise gloomy shop. And when at length Trelawney retired, when the arthritis got the better of him and he was no longer able to make candles with the speed and the agility needed to keep a shop in business, he sold up and made a hefty profit and retired to his lonely, strange house on the top of the cliffs. And there the people in the town below would note the oddity of the man, because summer or winter, spring or autumn, as soon as it began to get dark, window after window after window in that big rambling old house, too big a house for one little old man, candlelight would come on. And the people in the town below wondered that he could afford to burn that many candles in room after room, because he couldn't possibly be using all of those rooms. And even the char lady who went up to push a broom around and a mop and prepare an evening meal for old Trelawney said, no, he lives most of the time in his library, for his second greatest love in life after candles is books and reading. And there he'll be all day by the sunlight reading and all evening by the candlelight reading. The other rooms he hardly goes into at all. Why then, said the gossips of the town, why then does he burn candles in so many rooms if he's not using them? Does he have guests? And the char lady said, well, no, I don't think, aside from me, anybody else has stepped foot in that house in many a long year. As to why he burns candles, well, all I can say is that he is afraid of the dark. And the people in the town below shook their head and thought it most odd. And so it continued on, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. Until one spring equinox eve, as the darkness was falling, even though the light was at balance, nonetheless, even upon the eve of the equinox, darkness must fall. Trelawney did exactly as he'd done for evening upon evening upon evening before. He went from room to room to room, distributing the candles he made himself, albeit at a very slow pace these days. But he made them himself, and he put them in candlestick after candlestick after candlestick, here and there and everywhere, in the library, in the dining room, in the kitchen, in the bedrooms, in the study, in all of the rooms of his rambling old house. And he would go just as twilight was beginning to fall with a taper, and he would take that taper and he would light candle after candle after candle until the house was aglow. And he'd done the downstairs rooms, and he was just about to go upstairs and do the upstairs rooms when he passed, as he always did, the cellar door, the one room of the house which he never lit candles in, because, frankly, he never had call to go into the cellar for anything. And just as he was walking past the door of the cellar, he heard a whispering and a rustling, something strange and susurrus and distant echoing up from the dark, dank cellar. And he thought to himself, do I have rats? And then he heard a scuttering around. I must have rats. And he listened more closely. And he could pick out the odd word here and there. Fear, worry, weeping. Oh, my brothers. And never in all of his long, long life had Trelawney heard rats talking. Chittering, squeaking, but not talking. And he thought, good Lord, I have not rats, but robbers, worse. There are people, probably from the village, envious people who want my money from the sale of my shop, who have come here and hidden in the cellar, and they're going to burst out when they think I'm asleep and murder me in my bed and rob me blind of my money. But then he thought how odd that they should be in the cellar. If they were planning on murdering him, they could have easily come through the front door or clambered in through a window as to hide in the cellar. And the more he sat shaking and shivering and listening, the more the odd snatch of a word here and there he could hear whispered, until curiosity got the better of him, and he took the candelabra he was holding and put it to one side, and eased open the door of the cellar as quietly as he could. And even in his slippered feet, in his nightgown ready for bed, he took a step onto the first rung of that ladder-like staircase that went down into the cellar. and he could hear a little better. And then he took another step and another, and went as far as he dare, for fear that if he went any further down the stairs, surely the robbers, or whoever they were in the cellar, would see him, if not indeed hear the creak of his tread upon the stairs. And there he sat, silent as a mouse, and he listened in the dark, the shadows he so hated and feared. He listened and he heard voices, many voices, deep voices, high-pitched voices, medium voices. Some voices sounded male, some almost feminine in their highness. And a voice, a deep voice, said, "Welcome, brothers. Welcome, brothers of the shadows. Welcome one, welcome all." And Trelawney's heart started to race. So hard he thought surely they must be able to hear the pounding down there, but if they did, they made no indication of it. "Tell me, brothers, tell me what you have done this day." "Oh," said another voice, "oh, oh, today, Master Shadow, oh, you would be so proud of your apprentice. Today I slipped from this dark, dark cellar. I slipped up and out of the house when the old man was in the library." And Trelawney's heart began to race the further and the harder. "I slipped out of the house, down, down, down the long winding roads, down to the town. And there, as I crept into the town, I heard the crying of a child from an upstairs bedroom." "What did you do?" said the Master Shadow. "Oh, Master, I crept into the house. I slipped from corner to corner. Up and up the stairs I went, into that small, grimy, filthy, dusty room. And there I saw a woman so thin she had not eaten in days, and so tired, and oh, the circles around her eyes. And there she had a baby in a crib, and it was this baby I had heard crying. And the woman sat there looking as if she were ready to throw herself and her infant from the window. She was so wretched and unhappy and exhausted. And oh, Master, do you know what I did then? Tell me, what did you do then?" "Oh, Master, whilst she stared weeping out of the window, I slunk and I slithered and I clambered up into the child's crib." And Trelawney sat chewing upon his fingernails for horror of what might happen to that infant, because he, being so far outside of the town, had heard nothing of whatever deaths and depravities had taken place in that day in the town far below. "Ah, and then," said the shadow, "then, as the child sobbed and wailed and cried, I danced, I leapt and turned and twisted around the crib, and the child watched me. He watched the shadow moving and turning and dancing, the dance of shade and light, and all the pirouettes and the arabesques that I mastered. You, Master Shadow, would be so proud, and I danced so well the child laughed and stopped crying. And then the child's eyes grew heavy and the child fell asleep. And when the child slept, I think for the first time in several days, then that poor wretched mother fell deeply asleep in the chair, she too the first time in several days. And as they slept, why, I left them to their rest." And Trelawney was surprised at this. He had expected some account of murder, of butchery, of mayhem. Not a sleeping babe and a sleeping mother. "Ah!" said another voice. "I too, master, went into the town today whilst the old man was at his library. I went up the steps and I slipped out and he didn't even notice me. And down and down and down into the town I went. And there I saw a young man sitting upon a wall outside a church. And do you know what this young man had?" "Tell me," said the Master Shadow. This young man, he had an easel, and he had paints, and he had brushes, and he was wearing a smock. But that smock was as white as the canvas that he was staring at, staring and staring and tearing at his hair, and all I could see he was despairing for inspiration. And do you know what I did, master?" "Tell me," said the voice. "Oh, master, I went dancing amongst the tombstones. I leapt and I turned and I twisted. I scurried and jumped. All the scenes I created." And then the young man's eyes lifted and he looked at the forms I was making in that churchyard, the weird, the strange, the grotesque shapes that I had created amongst the tombstones, amongst the angels and the cherubs. Oh, he watched it all, and in a frenzy he started to sketch upon his pad, and then even as I kept turning and dancing, he was dipping brushes in paints and creating and creating and creating. And finally, oh master, finally when I grew tired of dancing such that my tentacles ached, I went across to where the artist was bent across his easel, and without him noticing his back to me, you know what I did?" And here Trelawney bit his fingernails again and thought, "Oh, that poor young man, what did they do to him?" "Ah!" said the shadow. "Ah! I looked at the canvas and oh, it was beautiful. Oh, the shadows and the shapes and the forms he had depicted me. I looked wonderful in his paintings. And you know, even as I left the town, I heard one of the gossips say that that young man had sold his painting for a month's wages that very day before the paint was even dry upon the canvas, and that he was being lauded by the artistic members of society in the town as a promising newcomer." And the shadow fell silent. And Trelawney again thought, "Well, I thought he was going to bite the young man's head off. But he sold a canvas, he made money. The starving artist fed himself. How strange." "Oh," said a third voice. "Oh, master. Oh, what a sorrowful tale I have to tell. Oh, this very day I walked slowly up the stairs and past the library where the old man is reading. Into the town I went, further and further, right to the very harbour itself I went, and I passed the window of a humble house of fisherman's cottage, master. And inside, oh, inside, master, do you know what I heard?" "Tell me," said the Master Shadow. "Oh," said that sad, lugubrious shadow. "Oh, master. Screaming, I heard screaming, and shouting, and the smashing of crockery, and howls of pain, and sobbing, master. I heard such sobbing. So into the house I went through a broken window. Over the jagged glass I climbed, into a humble room, filthy and grimy, with chairs overturned and blood upon the floor. And there I saw a man and a woman, screaming and shouting and arguing and beating and punching of each other, woman hitting man and man hitting woman. Oh, it was terrible, master. The things, the language, the words, the accusations. Oh, master, never have I heard such things, never. And the sobbing? Asked the Master Shadow. Oh, master, master, even as I stood watching the two people beat each other, so I heard weeping, oh, such weeping from a cupboard. And of course it was a rickety old cupboard that did not shut quite properly, and so I was able to thin myself down and slide into the cupboard. And there, oh master, there was a little boy. A little boy scarce 7 or 8 years old, thin, with bruises fresh and bruises old. Shaking and shivering, master, shaking and shivering and weeping, weeping to hear his mother and father rip and tear into each the other. And, oh, master, I remembered what you had told me. Oh, I did, master, I remembered well, and do you know what I did to that boy, to that weeping boy? Do you know what I did? And Trelawney nearly vomited to think of it, for he had once been that very boy many, many decades earlier, weeping and sobbing as his parents ripped and tore at each other until the day his father died and his mother put him out to apprenticeship. Oh, master, I reached out my arms, my wings, I reached them out around that little boy, and I held him, and held him, and held him, and together we sat and we rocked, and I held that boy until he was calm and asleep and carried away to a land of dreams, where he could not hear his mother screaming or his father roaring or the crockery breaking. And when at length the parents had grown tired of their drunken disputes, and themselves had fallen exhausted upon the kitchen floor, their fight at an end once more, I still sat with that boy, rocking him in my wings, my many arms folded around him, until I was sure he was at peace. And then, master, then I left to come back to tell you my tale, as we must, we apprentice shadows, each and every day, to talk to you, our beloved master. And as Trelawney sat upon the step, high upon the stairs in the cellar, he listened to tale after tale after tale, told by the Brotherhood of Shadows, of all of the good that darkness had done that day, of leaping and turning and twisting shadows, of comforting shadows, of secreting shadows, of discreet shadows. And when at length his eyes grew heavy from listening to the tale of the shadows, he went upstairs, and went first to his study, to where the candelabra had been lit first of all. And now he went from candle to candle to candle throughout the house, until there was not a candle left burning except the little one to light himself to bed. And when he was fully tucked up in his blankets, even this he extinguished. And from that day to the end of his life, Trelawney was a friend to the Brotherhood of Shadows.